The world is a wall of wood and steel. Your world is the 3 feet of space behind your shield. The smell of your own sweat, the stench of the man beside you, and the coppery tang of blood that hangs in the air like a wet shroud. For 9 hours you have stood on this ridge, this cursed piece of high ground the Normans call Senlac. For 9 hours the sea of kite shields and conical helms has washed against your wall, only to break and recede, leaving a human tide rack of dead and dying men and horses. You are a housecarl, sworn to Harold Godwinson, King of the English. A week ago, you were 250 miles to the north, hacking at Harold Hardrada's Norsemen at Stamford Bridge, sending the last great Viking to his gods. You barely had time to bind your wounds before the news came. William, the bastard Duke of Normandy, had landed his army on the southern coast, so you marched. You marched until your feet were raw, until your mind was a dull hum of exhaustion. And now you stand here, on this hill, as the autumn sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and blood. The Norman cavalry charges again. It is the 10th time, or the 12th. You have lost count. The ground shudders under the weight of 1,000 war horses. You plant your feet in the churned mud, lock your shield with the man to your left and the man to your right. You are not an individual. You are a single scale on the dragon's hide, an interlocking piece of the siled whale, the shield wall, the heart and soul of Anglo-Saxon warfare. The lances come, a forest of ash and iron. They shatter against the timber, splintering with sounds like cracking bones. A man to your right screams, a lance head punching through his shield and deep into his chest. He slumps, but the man behind him steps forward, plugging the gap before the Norman line can exploit it. The wall holds. It always holds. You see the Duke himself, a monster of a man on a black stallion, his banner of the papal cross whipping in the wind. He is a force of nature, a whirlwind of violence and ambition, and he has thrown everything at you. His archers were useless, their arrows arcing harmlessly over the wall or sticking into the shields. His infantry, a rabble of mercenaries and levies, broke against you in the morning. Only his knights, these iron-clad centaurs, possess the power to threaten you. Yet, after a full day of fighting, they have achieved nothing but their own slaughter. The slope of the hill is slick with their horses' entrails and their own blue blood. Then, something changes. A horn blows a different note, a command you do not recognize. The Norman cavalry, the ones who are still alive, turn their horses. They are retreating. A murmur runs down the English line. Is it over? Have they broken? A cheer begins to rise from the Fyrd, the militia levies flanking the housecarls. They are farmers and fishermen, brave but undisciplined. They see a fleeing enemy. They see glory. Hold the line. The voice is Harold's, your king, positioned just behind the central anchor of the wall. Hold. It is a trick. His command, his presence, his everything. He is Godwinson, the hero of the North, the man who saved England from one invader already. His voice is the iron rod that stiffens the spine of the army. Most of you obey. You have seen too much death today to be swayed by cheap ambition. You remain locked in place, a bristling hedge of spears and axes. But on the right flank, the Fyrd cannot be restrained. They have endured the charges, the fear, the sight of their kinsmen dying all day. The dam of their discipline breaks. With a roar, a few hundred of them surge down the hill, axes held high, chasing the retreating knights. It is exactly what William wanted. You watch with a cold knot in your stomach as the trap is sprung. The Norman cavalry wheels around. The pursuing English, now on open, flat ground, and without the protection of the shield wall, are caught. They are ridden down, butchered without mercy. A wave of groans ripples through your ranks. It was a costly mistake. William, seeing the success of his feigned retreat, reforms his knights. He will try it again. He knows the shield wall is a static, defensive formation. Its strength is its unity. Its weakness is its immobility. If he can lure you out, piece by piece, he can destroy you. The horns sound again. The knights charge, clash, and then, once more, they turn to flee. This time, the English line is a rock. No one moves. The lesson has been learned in blood. The ferdmen who broke rank are a carpet of mutilated corpses at the bottom of the hill. You watch the Norman horses canter away, their riders looking back, expecting a pursuit that does not come. A grim smile touches your lips. The bastard's one clever trick has failed. And then, the world shifts. It does not happen with a grand thunderclap, but with a single, improbable moment of chance. As the Norman knights retreat, a flight of arrows from your own line, loosed in a final, defiant volley, arcs high into the twilight sky. It is a desperate parting shot, not aimed at anything in particular, but one arrow, fletched with goose feathers and tipped with bodkin point, finds its mark. It does not strike William, it strikes his horse. The great black stallion screams, a terrible, piercing sound that cuts through the din of battle. It rears, collapses, and throws the Duke of Normandy to the ground. He lands hard, his leg trapped beneath the dying animal. The papal banner falls with him. For a moment, there is only confusion. The Norman knights halt their feigned retreat, turning to see what has happened. The English on the hill peer into the gloom, unsure of what they are witnessing, but Harold Godwinson sees it. Your king sees it. He does not hesitate. Forward! The axe, for England. The cry is taken up by 1,000 voices. The shield wall, for the first time all day, moves not to plug a gap, but to attack. It is not a wild charge, but a disciplined, grinding advance. The dragon banner of Wessex moves forward. The housecarls, the elite heart of the army, surge down the hill. You are one of them. Your great two-handed Danax, a weapon of terrifying power, now held in both hands. Your shield is slung over your back. This is the time for killing, not for hiding. The Normans are in disarray. Their duke is down, his banner out of sight. A rumour, fatal and swift, flashes through their ranks. The duke is dead. They have no leader to rally them, no central point of command. Their Breton and Flemish allies on the flanks, mercenaries who fight for coin, not for love of a Norman lord, see the tide turning. They are the first to break. They turn and run for the ships, for their lives. Their panic is contagious. The centre of the Norman line, now faced with the inexorable advance of your axe-wielding brethren, dissolves. Knights who had charged with such arrogance moments before are now isolated, surrounded, and dragged from their saddles. Your axe rises and falls. It splits a Norman shield, then the helmet behind it. You feel the bone give way. There is no art to it, only brutal, efficient work. You are an executioner, and this hill is your scaffold. You reach the spot where the Duke fell. He is not dead, not yet. He has untangled his leg from his dead horse and is fighting on foot. A cornered lion. He is a formidable warrior. His sword, a blur of silver. But he is one man against a tide. You see Gurth and Leofwine, King Harold's own brothers, close in on him. They fight with the desperation of men defending their very soil. A Norman knight tries to intervene, to save his duke, but a housecarl's axe cleaves him from shoulder to hip. Then, it happens. William, parrying a spear thrust from Leofwine, exposes his side. Godwinson, a giant of a man, lunges forward, his own spear finding purchase in the mail rings under the Duke's arm. William stumbles. Before he can recover, a dozen axes fall. The great ambition of Normandy, the papal blessing, the claim to the English throne, it all ends right there, in a storm of English steel, on a muddy patch of Sussex soil. The death of the Duke is the death of his army. The retreat becomes a rout, a slaughter. There is no mercy. You and your comrades pursue the fleeing invaders all the way to their ships, cutting them down as they run. They are not soldiers anymore, just terrified men, and you give them no quarter. This is not just a battle, it is an exorcism. You are purging your land of a foreign contamination. As darkness finally falls, you stand on the beach, the Channel tide washing in, pink with blood. What remains of the Norman fleet is a chaotic scramble of panicked men trying to launch their ships, some even capsizing in their haste. There will be no organized retreat. There will be no second invasion. You make your way back to the hill that will forever be known as the Hill of the Dead. The moans of the wounded from both sides fill the night. At the summit, by the ragged remains of his royal standard, stands Harold Godwinson, King of England. His face is grim, etched with exhaustion and grief for his own dead. But his eyes hold the unmistakable light of victory. He looks down at the corpse of his rival, a man now stripped of his finery by battlefield scavengers, unrecognizable as the proud Duke who had challenged a kingdom. You have won. Against all odds, you have won. The Norman dream is over. England is safe. The House of Godwin is secure. You have defended your land, your king, your way of life. Standing there, amidst the carnage and the silence, you feel the immense weight of what has just happened. History was hanging by a thread, and that thread did not break. A world has been saved. Another has been stillborn. You are standing on the walls of Eoforwic, the city the Norsemen called Jorvik, and future generations might have called York. It is the autumn of 1071, 5 years since the miracle on Senlac Hill. 5 years since you helped send the bastard Duke of Normandy to hell. The air is cold and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and the brackish tang of the River Ouse. Below you, the city is a thriving maze of timber-framed houses, their roofs thatched, their gables carved with the intricate, interlocking beasts of the north. This is not the southern capital of Winchester, with its Roman ghosts and its proximity to the continent. This is the heart of the Danelaw. This is the heart of the New England. After the victory at Hastings, the world did not simply fall into peaceful order. Victory, you have learned, is not an end, but the beginning of a new set of problems. The Pope, Alexander II, the same man who had blessed William's invasion banner, did not take the news of the Norman defeat with grace. King Harold Godwinson, the oath-breaker, the victor over a papal champion, was excommunicated. England was declared a pariah state, a rogue island cut adrift from the grace of Catholic Europe. The merchants of Flanders and Francia, once your trading partners, closed their ports. French princes and Norman remnants raid the southern coast, small, spiteful attacks that are easily repelled but serve as a constant, nagging reminder of your isolation. Harold, your king, is no fool. He is a warrior, yes, but the years since Hastings have revealed him to be a statesman of cunning and brutal pragmatism. He understood that a south-facing England, An England that looked to Normandy and Paris for its cultural and political cues, was a dead England. The continent saw him as an illegitimate usurper, so he turned his back on the continent. He turned his face to the north, to the cold seas from whence his own ancestors had come. He looked to his old enemies and saw new friends. That is why you are here, on the walls of Jorvik. You are part of the king's retinue, watching as the future of England sails up the Ouse. It is a fleet of dragon ships, their prows carved into snarling heads, their single square sails painted in stripes of red and white. This is the delegation of Sweyn Estridsson, King of Denmark, nephew of the great Canute, who once ruled this entire land. For 5 years, Harold has been in negotiation with him and with the weakened court of Norway. The negotiations have been a masterclass in diplomacy. Harold did not beg. He offered a partnership. You were there, in the great hall of the newly rebuilt minster, a hall of timber, not of stone. The air was thick with the smoke of 100 torches. Harold sat on a high seat of carved oak, not a continental throne. He wore English wool, not French silks. He laid out the terms, his voice resonating with the hard-won authority of a king who had twice saved his kingdom in a single month. He spoke of shared blood, of a shared sea. He spoke of a common enemy, the rapacious, land-hungry lords of Francia, and the ever-expanding influence of the Holy Roman Empire. He offered what the Danes and Norse could not refuse: wealth and security. England's vast wool production, the finest in the world, would no longer go to the looms of Flanders. It would go to the new trading posts of Rebay and Bergen. English silver, mined in the Pennines, would fill Scandinavian coffers. In return, the fleets of Denmark and Norway would join with the English fleet, the descendant of the great navy of King Alfred. Together, they would control the North Sea, from the coast of Vinland to the mouth of the Baltic. They would be the masters of the northern trade routes, a silver and wool empire built on the longship and the cog. It was an alliance born of necessity, sealed with pragmatism. There was an ethical tension to it that you felt in the hall that day. To secure this northern axis, Harold had to be ruthless at home. The southern Thengs, men with family and economic ties to Normandy, who argued for reconciliation with the Pope, were systematically dispossessed. Their lands were given to loyal housecarls from the north. The great southern monasteries, rich and defiant, found their funds diverted by royal decree to the shipyards of Jorvik and Lincoln. Harold was saving England by amputating its southern limb. He was choosing a future rooted in a shared Germanic and Norse past, and in doing so, he was severing 1,000 years of connection to the Roman world. The unexpected twist in this grand strategy was how quickly and completely it worked. The continent, embroiled in the great struggle between Pope and Emperor, had little time or resources for a full-scale invasion of a now militant and allied England. The French monarchy, without the existential threat of an Anglo-Norman rival on its doorstep, turned its focus inward, beginning the long, slow process of consolidating its power over its own unruly vassals. England, once a prize to be fought over by continent and Scandinavia, had made its choice. It had become the anchor of a new northern power bloc. You watch as the Danish king's envoy, a burly jarl with a beard braided with gold rings, is met at the docks by Harold's eldest son. The alliance will be sealed not with a treaty written on parchment, a lawyer's trick, but with a marriage. Harold's daughter, Gunhild, will be wed to the Danish crown prince. It is the old way, the only way that matters. A bond of blood. This new reality is reflected everywhere you look. The language spoken in the streets of Jorvik is a thick, guttural English, peppered with Norse words that have been here for generations. The merchants from Bergen and Dublin and the Icelandic settlements move with the easy confidence of men in a friendly port. They trade in walrus ivory from Greenland, furs from the vast forests of the east, amber from the Baltic shores, and they take back English wool, tin, and silver. London, far to the south, has become a provincial backwater, a military outpost to watch for French raids. Its river, empty of the great trading ships that now flock here. The centre of the kingdom's gravity has shifted north. This is the North Sea Compact. It is not a formal empire with a single ruler, but a sphere of influence, a confederation of sea kings, bound by mutual interest. Their fleets now patrol the Channel, not as raiders, but as a coast guard, a wooden wall against the continent. They are the arbiters of the northern world. Their power is not in land armies and stone castles, but in the wind and the waves and the carrying capacity of their ships. As you turn to leave the wall, you see a priest, a man from Canterbury, his face thin and pinched with disapproval. He looks at the Danish dragon ships with undisguised contempt. To him, they are pagan relics, symbols of a world that Christ had conquered. He represents the old England, the England that looked to Rome, but his world is dying. The future is here, in the bustling, worldly, half-pagan port of Jorvik. The king has made his bargain. He has traded a place in Christendom for the security of his crown and the prosperity of his people. He has built a fortress, not of stone, but of ships and alliances and shared culture, a fortress with its back to Europe and its face to the northern sea. You walk back towards the great hall, your mind grappling with the sheer scale of the change. 5 years. In 5 years, the entire geopolitical orientation of a kingdom has been rewritten. England has been untethered from its southern anchor and is now drifting into a new northern orbit. It is becoming a stranger, an island of familiar people on an unfamiliar path, a path that leads away from the sun of Rome and into the cold, clear, starlit night of the north. You are in the scriptorium at Winchester, in the year of our Lord 1105. The air is cool and smells of parchment, oak gall ink, and the beeswax candles that flicker, casting long, dancing shadows across the vaulted timber ceiling. Outside, a persistent drizzle falls, a soft grey curtain that isolates this world of letters from the world of men. 40 winters have passed since the slaughter on Senlac Hill. A new generation has been born and has come of age in an England that has never known a Norman master. You are here to witness the most profound consequence of that day, a consequence that flows not through the veins of kings, but through the very mouths of the people. Before you sits a monk, his back bent to his task. His name is Ethelred. He is not copying the Latin of the Church Fathers, nor is he illuminating a gospel. He is writing in a great leather-bound book. It is the Englisk Cranach, the English Chronicle, the living history of your people, written in your own tongue. His quill, cut from a goose feather, scratches a steady rhythm. You lean closer, your eyes tracing the sharp, elegant lines of the insular script. He is not writing of great battles or the deaths of kings. He is recording a decision of the local shire moot, a dispute over land and water rights between two thengs. The words he writes are alien to a world that might have been. He writes of folkrit, the folk right, the ancient unwritten law of the community. He does not write of justice, a word that has never crossed the channel. He describes the evidence given by the swearmen, the oathmen of the village. He does not call them a jury. The reeve, the king's agent, has made a dome, a judgment. There is no verdict, no sentence. You listen. You listen to the sound in your own mind as you read the words. It is a hard, clean language, a language of consonants and stresses that fall like hammer blows. It is rooted in the earth, in the sea, in the forest. It is a language that has grown from its own soil, ungrafted, unpruned by a foreign hand. In the England that could have been, this monk's chronicle would have been written in the dry, clerical Latin of an imported Norman abbot. The language of power, of law, of God, would have been French. The language you are reading now would have been the debased patois of the conquered, the grunts of peasants. It would have been fractured, simplified, and then flooded with 10,000 words from across the sea. It would have become a hybrid, a creole, a language of compromise. Instead, it is this. It is whole. It is pure. Its word hoard, its vocabulary, has grown organically. Where a new word is needed, it is forged from its own parts. The study of the stars is tunglecraft, starcraft, not astronomy. The telling of tales is spellcraft, storycraft, not literature. A man who builds with wood is a treauwriter, a tree-wright, not a carpenter. The words are transparent. You can see the concepts they are built from. They are not the opaque, imported abstractions of a ruling class speaking a different tongue. This is the great, unexpected twist of Harold's victory. By turning his back on the continent, he insulated the English language. Without a French-speaking court, there was no pressure to adopt French words. Without a French-speaking aristocracy, the language of the ruling class and the ruled remained the same. And this has had a staggering effect on the nation's mind. A thane in his hall, a merchant in Jorvik, a farmer in his field, they all speak the same English. The king's law, when it is read aloud in the shire court, is understood by all. There is no linguistic veil between the government and the governed. Literacy, as a result, is not the exclusive domain of the clergy. Thanes and their sons learn their letters because bookcraft, is a tool of their own trade. They read deeds, wills, and law codes written in the same language they used to command their housecarls. The administration of the kingdom is more efficient, more deeply embedded in the native culture than it ever could have been under a foreign-speaking regime. England speaks to itself in its own voice. You walk out of the quiet of the scriptorium and into the bustling market of Winchester. The rain has stopped. The air is alive with the sounds of commerce. Here, the language lives in its rawest form. A fishmonger cries out his wares. His words a stream of hard, Germanic sounds. Two men argue over the price of wool, their hands gesturing emphatically. Their speech is direct, forceful, and devoid of the polite, cushioned phrases that would have come with French. They do not request or propose. They bid and they ask. Their world is one of actions, not of nuanced intentions. This is the ethical tension of this un-French tongue. The language is a fortress. It has preserved a culture, unified a people, and streamlined a kingdom's governance. But a fortress, by its nature, is isolating. The great intellectual currents of the continent are beginning to lap at England's shores, but they cannot find a way in. The philosophical arguments of the School of Paris, the rediscovery of Aristotle through Arabic translations in Spain, the new poetry of the troubadours in Aquitaine, it is all happening in a world of Latin and emergent Romance languages. An English scholar, educated only in his own tongue, cannot easily access these ideas. The concepts are difficult to translate because the very building blocks of the language, the words themselves, are different. How do you speak of sovereignty when you only have the words siningdom, kingdom, the state of being a king? How do you debate grace versus works when your word for God's favour is the simple, earthy word giefu, gift? The English mind, shaped by the English tongue, is a practical, concrete, empirical mind. It is the mind of a farmer, a sailor, a smith, It is a mind that builds strong ships and writes clear laws. But it is not a mind that easily soars into the abstract heavens of metaphysics, or the subtle courts of romantic love. You stop by a tavern, the sign above it a crudely painted boar's head. Inside, a scop, a wandering poet, is entertaining the patrons. He is not singing of Lancelot and Guinevere, of chivalric quests and courtly love. He is chanting, his voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm, striking a small harp for emphasis. It is the tale of Edric the Wild, a Thane who fought against the last Norman remnants in the west 5 years after Hastings. The poetry is not in the rhyme. It is in the alliteration, the powerful percussive repetition of consonants. Heftig Herriman, heard in the hild, Plaga, Edric the Eager, on edge of the earth realm, fought for the folk, right, feared not the foeman. The men in the tavern lean in, their faces rapt. This is their history, their hero, their language. The story is one of loyalty to a lord, of the grim necessity of battle, of the spoils of war, and the comfort of the mead hall. It is a saga, not a romance. Its virtues are courage, loyalty, and generosity. The complex, often contradictory code of chivalry taking root in France has no place here. The relationship between a warrior and his lord is simple, a sworn oath, sealed with the giving of a gold ring. There is no room for the elaborate games of courtly love, when the very words for them do not exist. You leave the tavern, the scop's chant still echoing in your ears. The sun is finally breaking through the clouds, glinting on the wet thatch of the roofs. The language of this England is the kingdom's greatest strength and its most profound limitation. It has fostered a deep, unified, and resilient identity. The English know who they are. They are not a confused mix of Anglo-Saxon and Norman. They are English, full stop. But in building this strong wooden wall of words, they have cut themselves off from the grand, chaotic, and glorious construction of stone cathedrals and scholastic arguments that is defining the soul of continental Europe. They are becoming a people apart, an island in language as well as in geography. A world of thought is being born across the water, and England is not invited to the christening. You are standing in the open air, on a low, windswept hill in the heart of Mercia. It is late summer, the year of our Lord 1128. Below you, the fields are a patchwork of gold and green, ripe for harvest. But you are not here for the harvest. You are here for the law. This is the Thingstead, the ancient meeting place of the shire moot, the great assembly of the county. There is no building, no courthouse of stone. The only roof is the vast, indifferent sky. The only walls are the ring of faces, weathered and grim, that surround you. At the centre of the gathering, on a small mound, stands a gnarled oak tree, so old that its branches seem to hold up the clouds. It was here when the Romans came. It was here when the Angles first settled this land. And it is here that the king's authority is made real. Before you, 2 men are locked in a dispute. It is not a matter of theft or murder, which would be settled by ordeal or a swift judgment. It is a deeper, more elemental conflict. It is about the land. One man, Leofstan, claims that the water meadow on the bend of the river belongs to his family, as it has for 5 generations. The other, a powerful Thane named Ordgar, a man whose hall sits on the highest hill in the shire, claims the meadow was granted to his grandfather by royal charter. Leofstan has no charter. He has only a story. Ordgar has a piece of parchment, its ink faded, its Latin obscure. In the England that might have been, this would be a simple matter. A clerk would be dispatched from the nearest castle to consult the definitive record. The great book, the Domesday Book, the exhaustive survey of all of England commissioned by the Conqueror to catalogue his spoils. In that book, every hide of land, every mill, every plough, every man would be accounted for. The clerk would run his finger down a column of neat script, find the entry for this particular meadow, and declare the matter settled. The king's written word would be absolute, immutable, and final. Justice would be swift, efficient, and impersonal. But that book was never made. William the Bastard, the man who would have commissioned it, lies in a forgotten grave on Senlac Hill. Harold Godwinson, and his sons after him, had no need for such a thing. Why would a king need a book to tell him what his own people, in their own communities, already knew? To rule a conquered land, you need a map and a ledger. To rule your own land, you need only the loyalty of your folk. And so, the dispute is settled in the old way. The shire reeve, the king's man, does not act as a judge. He is a master of ceremonies. He calls forth the 12 swearmen, the oathmen of the local 100. They are old men, their faces like carved wood, their eyes holding the long memory of the community. They are not a jury assembled to weigh evidence. They are the evidence. Their minds are the unwritten Domesday book of this shire. They step forward, one by one, and place their hands upon a small wooden chest brought forth by the local priest. Inside, wrapped in silk, are the bones of a local saint, a holy relic of immense power, and they begin to swear. The first man, his voice quavering with age, swears that his father told him that Leofstan's great-grandfather had cut hay in that meadow. He swears it on the salvation of his eternal soul. The second man swears that he saw Leofstan's father drowning sheep dip in that very stream. The third swears that his grandmother spoke of a marriage agreement from 100 years ago that set the boundary of the meadow at the crooked willow tree, which still stands there today. It is a slow, sacred process. It is the weaving together of a communal truth from the threads of individual memory. This is what land ownership means in this England. Land is not a commodity defined by a map and a number in a ledger. Land is a story. Its boundaries are not drawn in ink, but in the collective mind of the people who live on it. To own land is to have your family's story be a part of the greater story of the community. You see the ethical tension laid bare. Leofstan's claim is rooted in this deep, organic truth. But the Theng, Ordgar, is a powerful man. He has more warriors, more silver, a larger hall. As the 7th and 8th oathmen step forward, you see them hesitate. They glance at Ordgar, who stands with his arms crossed, his face a mask of cold fury. Their voices are less certain. One mumbles that he cannot rightly recall. Another says that both families have used the meadow at different times. You can feel the weight of Ordgar's power pressing down on this ancient custom, bending the truth like a green branch. Without a written record to anchor it, memory is vulnerable to intimidation. Justice here depends entirely on the courage of old men. The unexpected twist is the sheer resilience of the system. Just as it seems the oath-swearing is faltering, the reeve calls upon the final oathman. He is the oldest of them all, a man said to be nearly 100, his eyes clouded with cataracts. He is led forward by his grandson. He places a trembling hand on the relic box. His voice is a dry whisper, but it carries an unbreakable authority. He speaks not of his father, but of his own memory. He remembers as a boy, seeing Ordgar's grandfather trying to claim the same meadow, and being rebuked by the Shiremoot then, just as Ordgar is being rebuked now. He remembers the old Theng paying a fine of 2 cows for bringing a false claim. His testimony is a thunderclap. It is a living connection to the past, a truth that cannot be browbeaten. A murmur of approval runs through the crowd. Ordgar's face darkens. He has lost. He has been defeated not by a lawyer or a document, but by the stubborn, persistent memory of his own people. He turns and stalks away, his honour diminished. The reeve declares the dom. The meadow belongs to Leofstan, as it always has. You realise you have just witnessed the foundation of this England's power structure. It is not a pyramid with the king at the top, his authority flowing down through written decrees. It is a web, a network of communities bound by shared memory and sworn oaths. Power is not centralised. It is everywhere. It resides in every village, in every shire, in the minds of the old men. This makes the kingdom incredibly difficult to rule from a single centre. The king cannot simply issue a new tax and expect it to be collected. He must persuade the shire moots. He cannot raise an army by decree. He must appeal to the loyalty of his thengs, who in turn must appeal to their people. This unwritten land is both a strength and a weakness. It has created a society with a powerful, localized sense of identity and a fierce resistance to tyrannical overreach. The English farmer feels the law is his law, not something imposed from above. But it also makes the kingdom fragmented, resistant to change, and vulnerable to the decay of memory or the rise of local bullies. Progress, in the form of grand royal projects, great cathedrals, unified legal codes, national taxation is almost impossible. England is a land of 1,000 local truths, not one royal one. Its soul is not in a book. It is in the soil, and in the stories the people tell about it. You are riding west, and with every mile, the land feels older, stranger, and less like the England you know. The soft rolling hills of Mercia have given way to a jagged, mountainous landscape that seems to scrape at the low-hanging clouds. This is the border, the ancient wound in the side of Britain, marked for centuries by the crumbling earthwork of Offa's Dyke. But the dyke is no longer a true frontier. It is a relic. The real border is the one you feel in the air, in the language of the shepherds who watch you pass with sullen, unreadable eyes, in the very spirit of the place. You are an envoy of the English king, journeying to the court of the Prince of Gwynedd. And you are deep in a foreign country. It is the year of our Lord, 1160. Nearly a century has passed since Hastings. In that time, your England has forged its northern identity. Its Germanic language has blossomed. Its laws have remained rooted in the community. And on its western flank, a different world has been allowed to grow in the Sunday. In the timeline that died on Senlac Hill, this entire region would be a war zone. Norman lords, hungry for land and titles, would have pushed relentlessly west, building a chain of stone castles, each one a nail hammered into the coffin of Welsh independence. They would have called themselves the Marcher Lords, and they would have ruled this land as their private kingdom, a place of brutal, incessant warfare. But the Marcher Lords were never born. The Norman incentive a king granting his barons the right to conquer whatever they could hold never existed. Harold Godwinson and his successors had no such policy. Theirs was a kingdom of defined shires and established borders. They demanded tribute from the Welsh princes, as English kings had done for centuries, but they did not seek to colonize, to supplant, to eradicate. Their ambitions lay across the North Sea, not across the mountains of Wales. This benign neglect has been the seed of a revolution. Without the constant, existential pressure of Norman aggression, the squabbling kingdoms of Wales have not been extinguished. Instead, they have been forged into something new. The strongest of them, Gwynedd, has slowly, methodically asserted its dominance over the others. And now you ride to the court of a man who calls himself not merely a prince, but Tywysog Cymru, the Prince of all Wales. You reach the coast of the Isle of Morn, the ancient heart of Welsh power, and arrive at Aberfraw. There is no great stone castle here. There is no grim, imposing keep designed to dominate a resentful populace. You see Alais, a royal court complex, surrounded by a ditch and a wooden palisade. At its centre stands a great hall, built of sea-weathered oak, its roof slated with stone from the mountains. It is a place of residence and governance, not a military garrison. Inside, the hall is alive with a colour and a sound that is profoundly un-English. Tapestries of vibrant red and yellow hang from the walls, depicting scenes from the Mabinogion, the great cycle of Welsh myth. The air is filled, not with the boisterous shouts of a mead hall, but with the intricate, melancholic music of a harp, its notes falling like raindrops in a quiet pool. At the far end, on a raised platform, sits Prince Owain IV, Owain the Great. He is a man in his prime, his dark beard streaked with grey, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He is the grandson of the king who first united the Welsh a century ago, and he wears that legacy with an easy confidence. He does not speak English. The entire proceeding is conducted in Welsh, a liquid, musical language that you cannot comprehend. A priest from a local monastery translates, his own English accented and strange. You have come to discuss the matter of the tribute, which Owain has failed to pay for the third consecutive year. Through the translator, you deliver your king's message, a stern reminder of ancient obligations. Owain listens patiently. When you are finished, he replies in a calm, measured tone. The translator turns to you. The Prince of Gwynedd says that the time of tribute is over. The Welsh are not the subjects of the English. He wishes for a new treaty, a treaty between equals, a treaty of trade and mutual respect for our borders. The sheer audacity of it takes your breath away. This is not the pleading of a weak vassal. It is the declaration of a sovereign. You look around the hall. You see his council, men with the hard faces of warriors, but also with the shrewd eyes of diplomats. You see the bards, the poets who are the keepers of the nation's memory, their status equal to that of the greatest lords. This is a court. This is a government. This is the ethical tension of this alternate Britain. The Norman Conquest would have been a brutal, bloody affair, a cultural genocide that would have suppressed the Welsh language and laws for centuries. That horror has been averted. In its place, this vibrant, proud nation has been allowed to flourish. You should feel a sense of justice in this. But you are English, and what you feel is a cold knot of dread. You see a rival, a threat. The mountains that the Normans would have conquered are now the unbreachable walls of a rival kingdom. The unexpected twist is not that Wales has survived, but that it has become a sophisticated political entity with its own distinct foreign policy. Owain, with a small smile, tells the translator to take you outside. In a field beside the Leas, a company of soldiers is at practice. They are not a feudal levy. They are a standing force, uniformed in green tunics. And they are armed not with spears, but with great bows of yew, nearly the height of a man. On Owain's command, an officer places a small wooden shield 150 paces away. The archers draw their strings to the ear, and with a sound like a tearing cloth, they release. 100 arrows rise into the air and fall in a tight, deadly swarm, shattering the shield into splinters. You have never seen archery like this. It is not the short-range harassment of the fyrd. It is a professional, lethal weapon of war. Owain explains, through his translator, that they have been perfecting this weapon for a generation, a tool to counter the charge of heavy horsemen. He calls it the hairbois, the longbow. He then leads you to his map room. But the map on the great table is not a map of Britain. It is a map of the Irish Sea. Lines are drawn upon it, connecting ports in Wales with Dublin, with Cork, with the Kingdom of the Isles, and even with Brittany and Cornwall. It is a map of a Celtic trading and military alliance. The North Sea Compact looks to the east, Owain says, the translator's voice relaying his cool confidence. It is only natural that we, the Britons, should look to our own sea. He has built his own sphere of influence, a network that completely bypasses and isolates England from the west. Your mission is a failure. You have not secured tribute. You have instead received a lesson in the new geopolitics of the island of Britain. As you ride back east, you look at the forbidding peaks of Snowdonia. You realise that the same process is happening in the north. The Kingdom of Alba, Scotland, without the constant interference and creeping colonisation of a Norman English monarchy, has also consolidated. It has strengthened its ties with Norway and Ireland, its Gaelic identity undiluted by French-speaking lairds. The Norman Conquest would have unified Britain through violence, eventually creating a single, powerful kingdom. Harold's victory has ensured the opposite. It has created a permanently divided island. Three nations, England, Alba and Wales, now share this landmass, each with its own language, its own laws, its own foreign policy, its own ambitions. The absence of a single, great act of violence has not created peace. It has created three sharp-edged pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit together. It has guaranteed a future of rivalry, of shifting alliances, of border wars. You have been spared the tyrant's peace, and in its place, you have been given the long, slow, grinding friction of nations. You are standing in the heart of a forest of giants, not of trees, massive pillars of ancient oak, each carved from a single colossal trunk, rise around you, soaring into a gloom so high it feels like a second sky. The pillars are not bare. They are alive with a riot of carved images, interlacing knots, snarling beasts, and the faces of saints whose eyes seem to follow you in the flickering candlelight. This is not a building of stone, cold and severe, born of Roman geometry. This is the great Christ Church of Canterbury, the mother church of the English folk, and it is the grandest timber hall in all of Christendom. It smells of old wood, beeswax, and the faint, sweet scent of incense that has seeped into the grain over centuries. It is the year of our Lord 1189. You are a young deacon, a scribe in the service of the Archbishop, and your heart is a knot of anxiety and awe. Today the Great Synod is being held, a gathering of every bishop and major abbot in the kingdom. They have come to answer a challenge thrown down from 1,000 miles away, from the sun-scorched city of Rome. At the far end of the hall, seated on the great cathedra of St. Augustine, a throne of yew and walrus ivory, is Archbishop Elfric. He is a man who embodies the English Church. He is not a pale, ascetic scholar. He is a grandson of a Kentish thegn, a powerful landowner in his own right, with a broad chest and a booming voice more suited to a battlefield than a church. And, like many of the bishops seated before him, he is a married man. His wife and children live in a residence separate from the main church precinct, a fact that is as unremarkable to you as the rising of the Sunday. This is how it has always been. The source of the trouble lies on a small table beside the Archbishop's throne. It is a roll of parchment, sealed with the leaden bulla of Pope Clement III. A papal legate, a stern-faced Italian cardinal named Gregorio, had read it aloud to the court yesterday. His Latin was clipped and precise, and every word was a stone thrown at the foundations of your world. The bull, titled Anglicanae Ecclesiae Corruptio, the corruption of the English Church, demanded an immediate and total reformation. It commanded the expulsion of all married priests from their offices. It forbade the practice of bishops holding secular lands and titles. It declared that the king would no longer have any say in the appointment of his bishops. That power belonged to the Holy See alone. It was the full, undiluted fury of the Gregorian reforms, which had swept the continent a century ago, finally arriving on your shores like a tidal wave. You watch the faces of the bishops. These are not just men of God. They are the sons and brothers of the great things who rule the shires. They are politicians, administrators, and patriarchs of large families. To them, the Pope's demands are not a call to holiness, but a declaration of war. A bishop from Northumbria, a man known to have 5 strapping sons, leans over to his neighbour and mutters in his thick northern English, "The Roman preaches a cold gospel. What does a man who has never held his own child in his arms know of God's love for his flock?" Here lies the ethical tension of your church. The continental church sees itself as a bride of Christ, a body of men set apart from the world, pure and unsullied by worldly concerns like marriage, property, and children. The English church sees itself as a father to its people, a body of men deeply embedded in the world, sharing the same joys and struggles as their flock. Your priests are not a separate caste. They are the community's fathers, in both the spiritual and literal sense. Is this corruption, as the Pope claims? Or is it a different, more human kind of holiness? The Archbishop rises to speak. The great hall falls silent. He holds the papal bull in his hand. His voice is not angry, but heavy with a deep, resonant sadness. The Holy Father in Rome. He begins, his English clear and direct, without a trace of French or Latinate flourish. Bids us put aside our wives, to cast out our children, and to give up the stewardship of the lands our forefathers entrusted to our care. He tells us this is the path to God. He pauses, letting the words hang in the vast wooden space. But I ask you, my brothers, what path did our father Augustine walk when he first brought the word of Christ to this land? He did not command our kings to be beggars. He did not command our priests to be strangers to their own folk. Our church was planted in English soil. It has grown with English roots. Must we now pull it up and plant a Roman flower in its place? A flower that will wither in our northern air? He is not just defying the Pope. He is offering a complete, alternative theology of a national church, one rooted in its own history and its own culture. He declares that the synod will not enforce the bull. Instead, they will send their own mission to Rome, not to beg for forgiveness, but to instruct the Holy Father on the ancient and sacred traditions of the English folk. It is an act of breathtaking defiance, couched in the language of loyal instruction. Then comes the unexpected twist. A voice rises from the assembly. It is an old monk from Lindisfarne, the holy island in the north that has long had trading and spiritual contact with the Norse and the wider world. Through the port of Jorvik, "Your Grace," the old monk says, his voice thin but clear, "why must we always look south to Rome? The traders in Jorvik bring us tales from the great city of Constantinople, where the emperor himself appoints the patriarch. The Greek churches, the Russian churches, they are in communion with the true faith, yet they do not bow to the Bishop of Rome. They are their own heads, under Christ." A shocked silence descends upon the hall. This is a step beyond mere defiance. This is heresy. Or is it? The idea hangs in the air, seductive and dangerous. An English church for the English people. Not as a broken-off twig of Rome, but as a sister branch to the great churches of the East. An autocephalous church, a self-headed church. The concept, brought to England on the back of the North Sea trade winds, has now been spoken aloud in the mother church of the kingdom. Archbishop Elfric does not rebuke the monk. He simply nods, a thoughtful, calculating look in his eyes. The idea has been planted. The schism, when it comes, may not be a Protestant Reformation, but an Orthodox one. You spend the rest of the day copying the Archbishop's official response to the Pope. The words are polite, but the message is iron. As your quill scratches across the parchment, you understand that the English Channel has become more than a body of water. It is a theological chasm. The Pope's attempt to purify his church on the island has failed. Instead, it has pushed that church to conceptualize its own existence as something separate, something native, something that might not need Rome at all. You are no longer just a peculiar part of the Catholic family. You are becoming a different faith, a Christ of Canterbury, whose face is beginning to look distinctly and stubbornly English. You are a stranger here. Your boots are caked in the mud of a dozen French shires and the chalk dust of Flanders. You are a journeyman carpenter, but in your heart you are a student of stone. You have seen the new cathedrals rising in Laon and Chartres, skeletal wonders of ribbed vaults and flying buttresses that seem to defy God's own gravity. You have seen the new castles of the French king, their great circular keeps of dressed stone proclaiming a power that is absolute and eternal. You have come to England on the advice of a wool merchant, who spoke of a land rich in timber and in need of skilled hands. But as your small trading cog navigated the Thames estuary and you made your way inland into Essex, you have felt a growing sense of unease. Something is profoundly wrong with this landscape. It is the year of our Lord 1210. You are walking a road toward the great hall of a thegn named Eadwald, a man whose wealth is said to rival the king's. As you crest a low hill, you stop, and you look for the landmark that should announce his power. You look for the stone keep. Every man of consequence on the continent, from the mightiest duke to the petty baron, builds in stone. It is the language of authority. A tower on a hill is a statement, visible for 10 miles, that this land has a master. But here you see nothing. The horizon is empty, a soft green line of hills and woods under a grey sky. There are no watchtowers, no battlements, no stony fists clenched against the heavens. You begin to think the merchant has made a fool of you. This Eadwald must be a man of little importance, his hall no more than a large farmhouse. Then you round a copse of ancient beeches, and you see it. It is not a castle. It is a monster. It is a building so vast, so impossibly huge, that it seems less like a work of man and more like a feature of the geology. It is a hall, yes, but to call it a hall is to call a whale a fish. It is 300 feet long, its roof a high, steep peak that seems to touch the clouds, and it is made entirely of wood. You stand there, a gaping fool on the road, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of the thing. The walls are not made of rough logs, but of immense, vertically placed oak planks, each one the width of a man's chest, sanded to a silver-grey smoothness by a century of wind and rain. The roof is not thatch, but is tiled with tens of thousands of hand-split oak shingles, overlapping like the scales of a dragon. There are no soaring windows of stained glass, only high, narrow slits that are shuttered from within. The entire structure crouches within a series of massive, concentric earthwork ramparts and deep, water-filled ditches. A sleeping beast in its lair. This is Eadwald's fortress. Its walls are not stone, but earth and timber. You are met at the gate, a heavy, timber-framed gatehouse set into the earthen wall by the Thegns Reeve. He leads you inside, and as you enter the hall itself, your continental certainties crumble to dust. You are standing in a forest turned inside out. A double row of pillars, each one carved from a single titanic oak trunk, marches down the length of the hall, holding up a cathedral of beams and trusses. The complexity of the roof structure is breathtaking. You see king posts, tie beams, and arch braces all fitted together, with a joinery so precise it seems to have been grown rather than built. You are a carpenter. You know the craft. You look for the telltale signs of iron nails, of straps and bolts. There are none. It is all held together by mortise and tenon, by pegs of wood, and the perfect interlocking fit of the joints. This is the great divergence made manifest in wood. Without the Norman obsession with military subjugation, the architectural genius of the English was never diverted into the alien craft of stone fortification. The Anglo-Saxon tradition of the Great Hall, the symbolic and political centre of their society, was never abandoned. Instead, for 150 years, it has been refined, expanded, and perfected. The best minds, the most skilled handsmen who in your world would have been master masons, have dedicated themselves to the art of the treowerter, the tree wright. They do not build with dead stone, a material they consider cold, foreign, and fit only for tombs. They build with living wood. You spend the day with the Then's master wright, an old man named Wulfstan. He shows you the workshops, the seasoning sheds, where vast timbers are left to dry for a generation, the drafting floors where designs are laid out in full size with chalk and charcoal. He speaks of wood as if it is a sentient thing with a spirit, a will. He explains their philosophy. A stone castle is a prison, he says, his hands caressing the flank of a half-finished pillar. A man builds it to keep his enemies out, and he ends up locking himself in. It is a monument to his fear. But a great hall is a gathering place. It is the heart of the folk. It breathes. It lives and dies with the family it shelters. And in that statement, you find the ethical tension of this world. He speaks of the hall dying, and you know what he means. Fire. This entire, magnificent civilization of wood is terrifyingly fragile. A dropped torch, a stray spark from the great central hearth, and this masterpiece, a century in the making, could be reduced to ashes in a single night. A society that builds in wood is a society that lives with a constant, visceral awareness of its own mortality. The stone castles of France are built to last for 1,000 years, to project an illusion of permanence. These wooden giants are a testament to the beauty and the terror of the impermanent. Then, Wulfstan shows you the unexpected twist, the consequence of this vulnerability. He takes you to the deep well in the centre of the hall's courtyard. Beside it stands a row of leather buckets and a large wheeled hand pump of ingenious design. He explains that every able-bodied man in the Then's household is a member of the Fearwerd, the Fire Watch. They drill every week. At a sudden shout from Wulfstan, a horn blows, and you witness an incredible display. Men pour out of the barracks and ancillary buildings, forming disciplined lines. Buckets are filled and passed with astonishing speed. Men with long, hooked poles and wet blankets run towards the main hall, practicing how they would isolate a section of the roof and pull down burning timbers. Their fear of fire has not made them timid. It has made them organized. It has forced them to develop a level of communal discipline and a surprising degree of mechanical innovation pumps, cisterns, organized brigades that is entirely absent in the stone-built world, you know. Your world has outsourced its security to thick walls. Their world depends on the constant vigilance and cooperation of the community. As evening falls, you sit in the great hall. The central hearths are lit, the smoke rising to the high, dark rafters and venting through louvered smoke holes in the roof. The Then and his family, and 100 of his retainers feast and drink. The firelight dances on the carved pillars, making the interlaced dragons and heroes seem to writhe and twist in the shadows. The hall is warm, loud, and alive. It is a world away from the cold, echoing, stone-vaulted halls of the French nobility. You feel the immense, communal power of this place. But you cannot shake the image of the fire watch, the quiet fear that underpins this vibrant life. This is a civilization built on a precipice, a beautiful, elaborate, magnificent tinderbox. You are in the Great Hall of Winchester, and you are witnessing a kingdom hold its breath. It is the year of our Lord 1215, and the air in this vast wooden chamber, the largest in all of England, is thick with the scent of beeswax, damp wool, and the electric tension of a looming crisis. For a week, the Witenagemot, the great council of the kingdom, has been in session, and for a week it has been locked in a struggle not of swords, but of principles, against the king himself. This is not the Witenagemot of your ancestors. The council of wise men that once advised the king has, over the 150 years since Hastings, evolved into something far more powerful, far more formal. It is no longer a simple gathering of the great thengs and bishops. Following a series of reforms by the current king's grandfather, each shiremoot now sends 2 of its most respected landholders, chosen by their peers, to bring the voice of their folk to the king's council. You are here as a clerk to one of these shire thengs from Sussex, and you have a seat in the high gallery, looking down upon the assembly. You are watching the slow, creaking, organic birth of a nation's government. At the far end of the hall, on the high seat carved with the snarling dragon of Wessex, sits King Edgar II. He is the great-grandson of Harold Godwinson, and he has the same fair hair and fierce blue eyes you have seen in the royal tapestries. He is no tyrant. He is a good king, a strong king, a pious man who has ruled justly for 20 years. But he is also a king with a problem. A succession crisis in Norway, England's key partner in the North Sea Compact, threatens to dissolve the alliance that has been the bedrock of English security for over a century. Edgar believes, with all his heart, that England must intervene. He has proposed a great expeditionary fleet and the levying of the herigeld, the army tax, a fearsome, kingdom-wide tax not seen in a generation, to fund it, and the Witenagemot has said no. You look down at the faces. There is the Archbishop of Canterbury, his face a grim mask of episcopal authority. There are the great ealdormen of Northumbria and Mercia, their long grey beards resting on chests, clad in fine mail worn under their robes. And there are the shire thengs, men like your master, their faces weathered by the sun and wind of their own fields. They are not rebels. They are conservatives. They are the guardians of the Folkreet, the ancient law of the folk. The debate, which you have transcribed for days until your fingers are numb, has been a clash of 2 irreconcilable goods. The king and his war thengs argue for the security of the state. They speak of broken treaties, of the French wolves across the Channel licking their lips at any sign of weakness in the North Sea Compact. They speak of a king's duty to protect his realm, whatever the cost. But the shire thengs and the bishops speak of a different duty. A thane from the west riding of Jorvik, a man whose English is so thick with Norse words you can barely follow it, rose yesterday. The king is the shield of the folk, he boomed, his voice filling the hall. But a shield that is so heavy it crushes the man holding it is no shield at all. This tax will ruin the small man. It will turn free farmers into beggars. We cannot save our friends in Norway by destroying our own folk at home. This is the ethical tension of this moment. In the timeline that never was, a king like John Lackland would have imposed such a tax by sheer force of will, seizing lands and imprisoning those who refused. That conflict would have led to a baronial rebellion, to a civil war, to a meadow called Runnymede, where a king was forced at sword point to sign a Charter of Liberties. But that is the path of a conquered nation, where the relationship between ruler and ruled is one of power versus power. Here, the relationship is one of custom. The king rules not by right of conquest, but by the consent of his people, a consent that is channeled through this very assembly. For Edgar to act like a Norman tyrant would be to betray the victory of his own ancestor. Now, on the seventh day, the king has made his final, impassioned plea. He stands before them, not as a monarch demanding, but as a leader persuading. He speaks of honour, of oaths, of the long view of history. It is a masterful speech. When he is done, a heavy silence falls. The Archbishop of Canterbury rises. All eyes turn to him. He is the spiritual father of the kingdom, the one man whose authority can rival the king's. The king speaks with a true heart, the Archbishop says, his voice calm and clear. His care for the kingdom is the care of a good shepherd for his flock. But the ancient law of this land is clear. The king leads the folk. He does not own the folk, and he does not own the land from which they draw their life. He cannot take a man's property without the free consent of the community. He turns, his gaze sweeping across the assembled men. Does the Witenagemot give its consent? One by one, the great lords and the shire thengs get to their feet, and one by one they speak a single, devastating word. Ness. No. The king's face is a storm cloud. For a moment, you think he will explode. You think he will sweep out of the hall and call his housecarls to arms. This is the moment where the kingdom either breaks or is remade. And then, the unexpected twist. The Archbishop does not simply sit down, having won the confrontation. He takes a step forward, holding up a roll of parchment. "Lest we find ourselves at this crossroads again, Your Grace," he says, his voice losing its confrontational edge and taking on the tone of a wise counsellor. "I and the learned men of this council have spent our nights in study. We have not sought to create a new law, but only to write down, clearly and without doubt, the ancient rights and customs of the English folk, so that the bond between king and people may never be broken by misunderstanding." He unrolls the parchment. It is not a list of demands. It is not a charter of liberty born of rebellion. It is a document titled the Eldrit Gesithnis, the Declaration of Ancient Right. It is a clarification, a codification of what everyone in that hall already believes to be true. It states, in simple, un-French English, that the king cannot levy a new tax without the consent of the Witenagemot. It states that no free man can be punished, save by the lawful judgment of his peers, according to the custom of his shire. It states that the king is as much under the law as the lowest farmer in his field. It is Magna Carta. But it is a Magna Carta without the war. It is not a concession won from a tyrant. It is a constitution growing out of a consensus. The king stands there, his jaw clenched. He is trapped. To refuse to accept this declaration would be to declare that he does not respect the ancient rights of his own people. He would be making himself a foreigner in his own land. With a slow, deliberate movement, he nods. He motions for his chancellor to bring the royal seal. You watch as the heavy wax is melted, and the king presses his signet ring into it. The crisp crunch of the seal is the loudest sound you have ever heard. It is the sound of a crisis averted, of a precedent being set, of a kingdom defining itself. The power of the king is now, forever, limited by the power of his council. But this limit was not imposed by the sword. It was established by an argument. You look down from the gallery, and you understand the profound difference in this world's soul. Its freedom is not a revolutionary concept, a radical demand for new rights. Its freedom is a conservative act, a fierce dedication to preserving the old ways. This government will be slow. It will be frustrating. It will be a government by endless debate, but it will be stable. It is a government rooted not in the divine right of a single man, but in the collective memory and consent of the entire nation. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It is not the familiar North Sea scent of salt and fish and cold stone. It is a smell of profound, overwhelming green. It is the scent of 1,000,000,000 trees, of damp earth that has never known a plough, of a wilderness so vast it feels like a physical presence. For 2 months, you have been on a cog, a wide-bellied trading ship out of Jorvik, and for 2 months you have seen nothing but the grey, heaving emptiness of the great Atlantic Ocean. Now, as the ship rounds a high, granite headland, you see it. You see the inheritance. It is the year of our Lord 1301. Before you lies Hrafnsvik Ravens Creek, the oldest and largest of the English Norse settlements in Vinland. It is not the city of your imagination. No new Winchester rising from the wilderness. It is a tough, sprawling, ugly and beautiful place, clinging to the edge of a continent like a limpet to a rock. A deep, fjord-like inlet is lined with a timber palisade, behind which you can see the steep, turf-covered roofs of 100 longhouses and the higher, shingled peaks of a dozen English-style timber halls. A thin plume of smoke rises from a charcoal burner's kiln, and another, darker plume comes from a smithy where the precious local bog iron is being worked. This is the frontier of your world, 2.5 centuries in the making. You are a clerk in the service of the King's Reeve of the Western Holdings. Your job is to audit the accounts, to survey the new land grants, and to produce an updated map of the known coastline. This is your first voyage. For you, Vinland has always been a fact of life, a place on the edge of the maps, a source of the fine marten furs your own wife wears on her cloak, and the strong, straight-grained timber used to build the king's newest ships. It has never been a myth or a dream. It is an asset. The real-world anchor for this entire enterprise is a set of sagas, Old Norse poems you read as a boy, telling of the first land takings by men like Leif the Lucky and Thorfinn Karlsefni. In the old days, their attempts failed. They were a handful of adventurers from a poor, sparsely populated Greenland. They lacked the resources, the manpower, and the will to sustain a colony against the hostility of the native Skrallings. But after Hastings was won, after the North Sea Compact was forged, everything changed. The Compact, this powerful alliance of England, Denmark, and Norway, had what the old explorers never did: a purpose. The continent of Europe, with its endless forests, was being steadily cleared. Good, strong ship timber was becoming a strategic resource, as valuable as wool or silver. The Compact, a civilization built on the sea, needed timber for its ships more than it needed bread, and Vinland was a forest without end. So the voyages started again, no longer as private ventures, but as royal expeditions, funded by the English crown and the Danish king. They came not just to explore, but to harvest. They built settlements not as homes, but as lumber camps and trading posts. Hrafnsvik is the result. You step off the ship onto a sturdy timber wharf. The men you see are a new breed. Many are fair-haired Englishmen or red-bearded Norsemen, but just as many are a mix. They are tall and lean, their faces weather-beaten, their eyes holding the watchful stillness of the forest. And among them are the others, the Skrallings. They are not the demons of the old sagas. They are a quiet, slight people with dark hair and skin the colour of copper. They move silently through the bustling settlement, trading stacks of beaver and fox pelts for iron knives, wool blankets, and steel axe heads. Here lies the ethical tension, a quiet, grinding tragedy that is plain to see. This is not a relationship of equals. The English and Norse have the iron, the ships, the organised state. The Skraelings have a deep knowledge of the land, which is being systematically bought from them piece by piece. You see a thegn, the holder of a royal land grant, haggling with a native chieftain over the price of a season's worth of pelts. The thegn offers a single iron cauldron. The chieftain, his face impassive, demands a cauldron and 2 knives. The thegn laughs, claps the smaller man on the shoulder, and walks away with the furs, leaving only the cauldron. There is no violence. There does not need to be. It is a conquest by commerce, a slow, relentless displacement that pushes the native people further inland each year, making them dependent on the very goods that are destroying their way of life. They are being turned into employees on their own land. You spend a month in Hrafnsvik, poring over the Reeves ledgers. The numbers tell the real story. 10,000 beaver pelts shipped to Jorvik last year, 500 tons of timber, 30 bars of refined bog iron. This is not an adventure. It is an industry. And it is this very mundanity that reveals the unexpected twist. One evening, the Reeve, a grizzled Norseman named Ketil, unrolls a great map for you in his hall. It is a masterpiece of cartography, a portolan chart showing the coastline of Vinland from the icy north down to the warm, swampy lands of the south. It is a work of generations of sailors and surveyors, a thing of immense beauty and astonishing accuracy. And as you look at it, a strange and profound realization dawns on you. In a world where William had won at Hastings, where England was chained to the continent, this discovery, an entire, unknown hemisphere, would have shattered the European mind. It would have been a new world, a revelation that would have triggered a frantic, gold-fueled, God-inspired age of conquest. It would have been a psychological cataclysm. But in your world, that never happened. Vinland was not discovered in a single explosive moment. It was revealed, slowly, incrementally, over centuries. For your great-grandfather, it was a dangerous rumour. For your grandfather, it was a remote trading post. For your father, it was a royal dominion. For you, it is a line item in the kingdom's accounts. There was no shock, no shattering of a worldview. The world was not turned upside down. The map was simply, quietly, extended to the west. This has had a profound effect on the soul of your people. There is no age of discovery. There is only the western expansion. There is no feverish talk of El Dorado or the fountain of youth. There is only sober calculation of timber yields and fur returns. The conquest of this continent is not a holy crusade or a mad scramble for gold. It is a slow, bureaucratic, business-like process of resource extraction. The Skraelings are not seen as souls to be converted for a heavenly reward, but as a labour problem to be managed. As you prepare for your return journey, you stand on the headland, overlooking Hrafnsvik, looking west. The sun is setting over the endless silent forest that stretches for thousands of miles, a continent of unimaginable size. But you see it not with the eyes of a conqueror, but with the eyes of an accountant. Your world did not find a new world. It just found a new, very large piece of property. And the inheritance is not just the land itself, but this cold, calm, and terribly efficient mindset. You have been spared the manic, violent fever of the Spanish conquistadors, and in its place you have been given the slow, grinding, and inexorable logic of the ledger book. You are cold. It is not the honest, clean cold of a German winter, the cold of snowbound forests and frozen rivers. It is a damp, penetrating chill that seeps through your fine woolen cloak, a chill that rises from the greasy waters of the Seine and the wet, grey stone of this monstrous city. You are in Paris, in the year of our Lord 1328. For a month you have travelled from the court of the Holy Roman Emperor in Prague, a journey across a fractured landscape of petty duchies, free cities, and prince-bishoprics. Now, you have arrived at the heart of the beast, and your own world of intricate, localized liberties feels 1,000 years away. This city is a statement of power, so absolute it suffocates you. You are a scholar, a junior diplomat in the emperor's service, and you have been sent here on a fool's errand to protest the latest, most brazen encroachment of the French king into the imperial lands of Lotharingia. As you walk the streets, you feel a crushing sense of your own insignificance. The cities you know, Cologne, Augsburg, Prague itself, are fine and ancient places, but they are villages compared to this. Here, the Cathedral of Notre Dame is not just a church. It is a mountain range of stone and glass, a work of such soaring ambition, it seems to be a new covenant between God and the King of France alone. The university, a city within the city, swarms with tens of thousands of masters and students from every corner of Christendom, all debating the fine points of Aristotelian logic in the Latin tongue, but with a distinct French accent. This is the intellectual forge of the world, and all the great ideas are being hammered out on a French anvil. This France is the logical, brutal conclusion of a history that took a different path. In your world, the kings of England were also the dukes of Normandy and Aquitaine, thorns in the side of the French monarchy for 300 years. They were a constant distraction, a bleeding wound that drained France of its strength, forcing its kings into a desperate struggle for survival. That struggle forged a certain kind of nation. But in this world, that struggle never happened. William the Bastard's bones are dust on a Sussex hillside. England is a strange semi-pagan island of wood-builders and sea raiders, a partner to the Norsemen, a geopolitical irrelevance to the continent. Freed from this existential rival, the Capetian dynasty of France was not forced to survive. It was free to plan. For 2.5 centuries, its power has grown, unchecked and relentless. You see the results everywhere. The great feudal lords, the dukes of Burgundy and Brittany, the counts of Flanders and Toulouse, are gone. They are not vassals, they are ghosts. Their ancestral lands have been absorbed, their castles torn down or converted into royal administrative centres, their families pensioned off with meaningless courtly titles. The process was not gentle. The Albigensian Crusade in the south was not a messy, drawn-out affair. It was a swift, exterminating blow, delivered by the full, undivided might of the royal army. France is not a kingdom of allied provinces. It is a single, monolithic entity, governed by a ruthlessly efficient bureaucracy of university-trained lawyers, who answer to the king and the king alone. The nation is a pyramid, and its capstone is the fleur-de-lis. You are granted an audience at the Palais de la Cité, a sprawling fortress palace that makes the Emperor's castle in Prague look like a hunting lodge. As you are led through halls of polished marble, past tapestries depicting the triumphs of French arms, you see the court. It is a glittering, dangerous serpent. The language is French. The fashion is French. The poetry is French. To not speak the tongue of Paris is to be a barbarian. To not understand the subtle games of power played here is to be a fool. You are finally brought before King Philippe VI. He is not a warrior king. He is slender and pale, his hands unmarked by the sword hilt. He is the product of generations of absolute security. His power is not in his body. It is in the vast, intricate machine of the state that he commands. You make your plea, your carefully prepared Latin sounding clumsy and archaic in this temple of French modernity. You speak of ancient treaties, of the territorial integrity of the Holy Roman Empire. The king listens with a look of profound boredom. He does not even deign to answer you himself. He gestures to his chief minister, a man named Enguerrand de Marigny, a commoner raised to incredible power on the strength of his intellect. De Marigny smiles, a thin, pitying expression. "The Holy Roman Empire," he says, his French a cascade of elegant condescension, "is a beautiful idea, a memory of Rome, a dream of Charlemagne." He lets the words hang in the air. The Kingdom of France, however, is not a dream. It is a fact. And the fact is, the people of Lotharingia now look to Paris for protection and for justice, not to your distant emperor. The king, in his generosity, has simply extended his hand to them. This is the ethical tension of this world. The French have brought order. They have crushed the endless, petty wars of the feudal lords. They have built roads. They have codified the law. The lands they absorb are, by any measure, more peaceful and more prosperous under their rule. They are replacing the chaotic, decentralized world of feudalism with the clear, rational, centralized world of the modern state. But the price of this order is the death of 1,000 local cultures, 1,000 ancient liberties. It is the peace of the well-managed estate, where the livestock are safe and well-fed, but they are no longer free. Then comes the unexpected twist. As you are being dismissed, a squire enters, carrying a newly illuminated map for the king's inspection. He unrolls it on a great table, and for a moment, you see it clearly. It is a map of Europe, but the borders are wrong. The eastern border of France is not the Meuse or the Moselle. It is the Rhine. All of it. From the Alps to the sea. And beyond the Rhine, the territories of the empire are not labelled with their ancient ducal names. They are labelled with new, French administrative titles: the Préfecture du Basseau, Rhin, the Territoire de la Forêt, Noir. It is not a map of what island. It is a plan, a blueprint for a conquest that, in their minds, is already complete. You realize your mission was not a negotiation. It was a formality, the polite notification given to a condemned man before his execution. The French are not nibbling at the empire's borders. They intend to swallow it whole. They see themselves as the only legitimate heirs of Charlemagne, and they are coming to claim their inheritance. You leave the palace, your heart a cold stone in your chest. In the courtyard, a company of the Garde Royale is drilling. They are not a feudal levy of knights and peasants. They are a professional, standing army, their steel crossbows and polished plate armour all of uniform design. They move with a silent, terrifying precision. They are the tool that will be used to make that map a reality. The Anglo-French wars of another timeline were a bloody, chaotic, and destructive tragedy. But you now understand a terrible irony. That endless conflict created a balance of power. It kept both nations sharp, but also kept both nations in check. In this world, there is no balance. There is only France, a beautiful, brilliant, and utterly merciless civilization, the unchallenged master of the continent. You have seen the future, and it speaks French. The great historical drama of Europe will not be a struggle between France and England. It will be the slow, methodical dismemberment of the German peoples by a hyper-centralized French empire. You feel it the moment you pass through Micklegate Bar, the great stone gateway into the city. The air changes. It is no longer the gentle pastoral air of the English Midlands. It becomes thick, heavy, charged with the energy of 1,000 churning wheels and 100,000 striving souls. It is the smell of money. It is the smell of coal smoke from 100 forges, of wet wool from the weavers' quarters, of Stockholm tar and drying cod, of Baltic amber and Greenlandic walrus ivory, all mingling with the damp, fishy breath of the River Ouse. You are a woolman from the Cotswolds, your family wealthy for generations on the backs of your sheep. But here, in Jorvik, in the year of our Lord 1346, you feel like a poor country cousin visiting his brutishly successful city relation. This is the heart of the kingdom. Not Winchester, the sleepy, ancient capital of the south, with its royal court and its quiet scriptoriums. Not London, a sullen, half-forgotten port, forever gazing suspiciously across the water at a hostile France. Here, this sprawling, chaotic, stone and timber city in the heart of the north. This is where the pulse of England beats strongest. For 2 centuries, since the North Sea Compact turned England's face away from the continent, the wealth of the northern world has flowed up this river, and it has pooled here, in the counting houses and warehouses of the merchants of Jorvik. You guide your pack horses through the shambles, a street so narrow the timber-framed houses lean towards each other, nearly touching, blocking out the sky. The press of the crowd is immense. You hear a dozen tongues. The hard, guttural English of the locals, still thick with the Norse of their ancestors. The clipped, singing speech of merchants from Bergen. The slow, heavy German of traders from Lübeck and Hamburg. Men of the great Hanseatic League, who maintain a fortified trading post, a Stallhof down by the river. This city is not merely English. It is cosmopolitan, the linchpin of a northern maritime empire. Your destination is the great guild hall of the Fellowship of Merchant Adventurers, the true rulers of this city. It is not a gift from the king. It is a fortress they built for themselves. It stands on the riverbank, a vast stone structure, with narrow barred windows and a single iron-banded oak door that could withstand a siege. It is a declaration in stone and mortar. Power here does not flow from a royal charter. It is seized and held by the men who control the ships. Inside, you are ushered into a waiting room. The walls are not hung with tapestries of saints or battles. They are covered by a single, colossal map of the known world, from the icy shores of Greenland in the west to the trading posts of Novgorod in the east. Lines crisscross the seas, marking the trade routes, the arteries through which the lifeblood of this city commerce flows. You are here to negotiate the sale of your year's wool clip, not to the weavers of Flanders, who have been your family's customers for 200 years, but to the shipping magnates of Jorvik, who will sell it on to the looms of Denmark and the Baltic cities. To refuse to deal with them is to go bankrupt. They have a stranglehold on the entire northern trade. You are finally brought before the council. They are not landed thengs with ancient titles. They are the Jarls of the Ouse, men with hard faces and harder eyes, their fortunes built not on the rent of farmers, but on the hulls of their cogs. They are dressed in fine, dark wool, but their hands are the calloused, powerful hands of men who have known the bite of a frozen rope. Herein lies the city's great ethical tension, its soul sickness. The man you are negotiating with, a patriarch named Ulfketil, is famously ruthless. His wealth comes not just from wool, but from the Vinland trade, an enterprise built on the slow, systematic exploitation of the continent's resources and its native peoples. His ships bring back timber and furs, bought for a pittance in iron axe heads and cheap trinkets, and in doing so, they fuel a prosperity that is breathtakingly unequal. For every merchant prince like Ulfketil, with his stone house and his private chapel, there are 1,000 souls crammed into the stinking tenements by the river. They are the dock workers, the keelmen, the weavers, the dyers, the men and women who do the hard, dangerous work that makes the trade possible. They live and die in poverty, their lives as expendable as a frayed anchor line. You have heard whispers of unrest, of secret guilds forming among the artisans, demanding a fair wage. You have also heard of how Ulfketil's private militia, the grimly named Huskarls of the Hans, deals with such whispers, with clubs and chains, and quiet disappearances in the night. The freedom of Jorvik is the freedom of the predator. Your negotiations are brief and brutal. Ulfketil knows the market price to the last penny. He knows you have no other buyer. You are forced to accept a price 20% lower than you had hoped for. As you leave the Guildhall, bruised and humbled, your clerk points out the unexpected twist in the city's financial anatomy. He points to a small, unassuming stone building down the street. It is the office of the Florentine banking family, the Bardi. And it is empty. Its windows are boarded up. They tried to set up here last year. Your clerk explains. Offered loans, letters of credit. The king was in favour of it. But the merchant adventurers, they would not have it. You had assumed a city this wealthy would be a hive of international finance. But the Jorvik merchants have developed their own system, one that keeps the power and the profits in their own hands. They do not borrow at interest, a practice they scorn as a southern papist corruption. Instead, they use the felag, an old Norse system of partnership. For any major venture, like a new trading voyage to Vinland, 100 or more merchants will pool their resources. They share the cost, they share the risk, and they share the reward. They have even created their own form of maritime insurance, a common fund to cover the loss of a ship or cargo. It is a closed, self-reliant system of incredible sophistication. By banning the Italian bankers, they have prevented the financial capital of the kingdom from falling into foreign hands. They have kept Jorvik's wealth in Jorvik's pockets. As dusk falls, you stand on the Ouse Bridge, looking at the forest of masts that chokes the river. The wealth here is immense, but it is a hard, cold, northern wealth. It has shaped a hard, cold, northern people. The chivalric code of the southern Thengs, with its talk of honour and duty, has no meaning here. Here, the only virtues are profit and loss, risk and reward. This is England's future, a future not of knights and castles, but of merchants and contracts. And you realise that the shift in the nation's economic gravity has caused a deeper shift in its soul. The island's identity is no longer being forged by the king's law in Winchester, but by the merchant's law in Jorvik. England has become a subsidiary of a great northern trading company, and the king is merely the chairman of the board. The world has ended, but it has ended quietly. It is the late summer of the year of our Lord 1349. The great mortality has passed over your village like the shadow of a hawk, and now, in the silence that follows, you are left to count the survivors. You are the reeve of this small Mercian community, a man who once kept the accounts for the local then and organised the ploughing of the common fields. Now, you are the keeper of a ledger of ghosts. Half the names on your roll are scored through. Half the cottages are empty, their doors swinging in the wind, their hearths cold. The air itself feels different. It is thinner. The constant background hum of human life, the shouting of children, the lowing of oxen, the ringing of the smith's hammer is gone. The silence is the loudest sound you have ever heard. You stand on the hill, overlooking the village, and you see not a community, but a wound. The great open fields, once a tidy patchwork of communal strips, are a ragged mess. A third of the strips are overgrown with thistle and dockweed, their owners and all their kin lying in the great pit behind the church. The harvest is a month away, and there are not enough hands to bring it in. This is the reality across all of England. The Black Star, as the Scot poets are calling it, has devoured the people. In the world that might have been, this demographic catastrophe would have been met with an iron fist. The Norman-descended lords, their wealth dependent on the labour of a legally bound peasantry, would have panicked. The king's government would have issued edicts, a statute of labourers freezing wages, forbidding peasants from leaving their manor, attempting to force the clock back to the world before the plague. This act of repression, this refusal to accept reality, would have sown the seeds of a violent, bloody rebellion a generation later. But your England has no manners. It has no serfs. Your village is a community of free farmers, ceorls, who hold their land from the local thegn, yes, but they pay him with a share of their crop and a few days of service a year, a bargain rooted in ancient custom, not in the chains of conquest. Your King Eadgar III and his Witenagemot in Winchester are too distant, their power too diffuse and dependent on the consent of the shire moots, to even conceive of a law that could dictate the price of a day's labour in every village in the kingdom. There is no central mechanism for repression, and so the crisis is not met with a royal decree. It is met in the old way. You call a moot. You gather the survivors, the 20 men of the village, where once there were 50, in the shadow of the ancient oak where you have always gathered. The thegn, a young man named Oswulf, whose father was also taken by the sickness, sits on a stone, his face pale and frightened. He is no great lord. He is a farmer, like the rest of you, just one with a larger hall, and a hereditary duty to lead you in war. His power depends entirely on your goodwill. He makes his plea. He speaks of the old ways, of the duty of the folk to plough his personal fields, to bring in his harvest, so that he can continue to protect the shire. But his words fall into the silence and die. An old man, a farmer named Godric, who has lost his wife and both his sons, stands up. His voice is cracked with grief, but it holds a new, hard edge of defiance. The old ways are buried in the plague pit, my lord, Godric says, his words simple but revolutionary. I have my own land to tend, and the land of my son, which is now mine. I have no time to work your fields, and with what right do you ask it? My service was a debt for the land I hold, but now land is as common as stones, and the hands that work it are as rare as gold. This is the new, terrible, and liberating arithmetic of your world. Land has become worthless. Labour has become priceless. Oswulf, the thegn, has no answer. He cannot force Godric. He has no bailiffs, no men-at-arms to compel obedience. His housecarls were his kinsmen, and half of them are dead too. To strike Godric would be to be branded a tyrant by the very community he is supposed to lead. He is powerless. Here lies the ethical tension of the Black Star. The plague was an unimaginable tragedy. It has ripped families apart and drowned the kingdom in grief. But from that grief, an accidental and profound justice is being born. The rigid, inherited hierarchy of society has not been challenged. It has been dissolved by a force of nature. For the survivors, the world has been turned upside down. They are living through a horror, but they are also being handed a freedom their ancestors could only have dreamed of. And then the unexpected twist happens. It is not a shout of rebellion. It is a quiet proposal. You, the reeve, who can read and write and cipher, step forward. You have been thinking about this for weeks. As the death toll mounted, you turn not to the then, but to the assembled farmers. The common fields are broken, you say. The system of strips is dead because the families who worked them are dead. But the land is still here. Let us redivide it. Let every man take what he and his kin can work. Not as strips in a common field, but as a single plot, a freehold, and let him pay the theng not in service, but in silver, a small fixed rent each year, so the theng can hire the men he needs himself. The idea is radical, but it is also perfectly logical. It is not an attack on the theng's status. It preserves his position as the chief landholder, but it transforms the farmers from semi-dependents into true tenants, into small businessmen. It monetizes the ancient relationship of service and loyalty. It is the quiet, practical English solution. There is a murmur of agreement. The men see the sense in it. It gives them autonomy. It gives the theng an income. It is a new bargain for a new and emptier world. You spend the next month walking the parish with a long measuring rope and a bag of marker stones. You are not just a reeve anymore. You are a cartographer of a new society. You are breaking up the great, open fields that have defined English life for 1,000 years. You are creating a new landscape of enclosed, family-run farms. The plough of the old communal world is being replaced by the plough of the individual. As you work, you realize the revolution is happening everywhere, and it is silent. There are no peasant armies marching on Jorvik or Winchester. There is only 1,000,000 quiet, individual negotiations. Farmers are not rebelling. They are simply leaving. They walk away from villages where the terms are bad and move to another shire where a desperate thegn will grant them a freehold for a pittance. The entire social structure is being rearranged not by war, but by the simple act of a man walking down a road in search of a better life. Your world is being remade. A great levelling has occurred, but it has also shattered the old bonds of community. The village is no longer a single cooperative enterprise. It is a collection of individual families, each working for its own profit. A man's success will now depend not on his place in the community, but on his own skill, his own luck. You have traded the security of the collective for the frightening, exhilarating freedom of the individual. The sea journey from Jorvik was a crossing into another world. The grey, boisterous waters of the North Sea, the familiar highway of your English world, gave way to the deep, unsettling blue of the Irish Sea. Now, as your ship navigates the mouth of a wide green river, the very air seems to change. It is softer, wetter, laden with the scent of peat smoke and a verdant, almost suffocating fecundity. This is Eire, an island that, in your English imagination, has always been a place of mists and myths, of saints and raiders. You are an envoy from the Witenagemot, sent to the court of the High King of Ireland in the year of our Lord 1357, and you are about to discover that the myths are dead. In the history that never was, this island would now be a patchwork of warring fiefdoms. Norman English lords in their stone castles would rule the fertile east. The Pale, while the native Irish chieftains would wage a hopeless, centuries-long guerrilla war from the bogs and mountains of the west. The land would be a bleeding wound, a colony, a place defined by its conquerors. But that conquest, like so many other things, required a Norman England. It required a king with a surplus of land-hungry, violent barons looking for a new world to plunder. The invasion of 1169, the one that would have broken Ireland's back, was predicated on a plea for aid from a deposed Irish king to a Norman monarch. In your world, that plea was met with a polite refusal from Winchester. The Anglo-Saxon kings of England had their eyes on the northern trade routes, not the western bogs. That single act of refusal, that turning of a royal shoulder, was the seed from which a new nation grew. Ireland was left to itself, and it was not peaceful. Your destination is the High King's seat at Clwain-Ree, the meadow of the king. It is not a city in your sense of the word. It is a vast, fortified island settlement in the centre of a great lough, connected to the shore by a single guarded wooden causeway. As your small boat is rowed across the dark water, you see not a single central keep, but a sprawling complex of concentric earthen and stone rings. Within them are dozens of large circular houses with conical thatched roofs, several great timber halls, and at the very centre, a stone church whose round tower stands against the sky like a watching finger. It is a place of immense, organic strength, a fortress that has grown with its people, not been imposed upon them. You are led to the great hall of audience. The difference from the halls of England is immediate. The English halls are halls of war and feasting, their carvings depicting dragons and battles. This hall is a library. The high walls are lined with presses, holding hundreds of leather-bound books and scrolls. Scholars in clerical robes move silently between them, their faces intent. The air hums not with the boasts of warriors, but with the quiet murmur of scholarly debate in three languages: the native Irish, the Latin of the Church, and, surprisingly, the Norse of the Dublin trading guilds. At the end of the hall sits the Ard Rí, the High King, Conchobar, the third of the Uí Nail dynasty. He is not a young warrior. He is a man in his 60s, his face a web of fine lines, his eyes holding a weary, intelligent light. He is flanked not by axe-wielding housecarls, but by his brehons, his judges, old men in white robes who are the living repositories of the Fenechas, the ancient and impossibly complex legal system of Ireland. Here lies the ethical tension of this independent Ireland. You have been reading the chronicles in preparation for your mission. The unity you see before you was not achieved by council or consensus. It was forged in a century of fire and blood. Left to its own devices, Ireland did not fall into a peaceful slumber. The provincial kings of Leinster, Munster, Connacht and Ulster, along with the High King, entered into a Darwinian struggle for ultimate supremacy. The Wars of the Five Kings, as they are now called, were a grinding, brutal affair, a series of Irish civil wars that were arguably more destructive than a foreign invasion would have been. Conchobar's grandfather, the first truly undisputed High King, was not a saint or a scholar. He was the most ruthless and effective warlord of his generation. He did not just defeat his rivals, he eradicated their entire family lines, extinguishing dynasties that had lasted 1,000 years. The peace you are witnessing is the peace of the victor, built on a foundation of Gaelic skulls. This unified, learned kingdom has been paid for with a currency of Irish blood, a trade-off that is never mentioned in the heroic poetry of the court bards. Your mission is to finalize the terms of a new trade treaty. The High King is a shrewd negotiator. He speaks through a translator, though you suspect from his eyes that he understands your English perfectly. He argues for lower tariffs on Irish wool and linen in the markets of Jorvik, and for higher prices for the English iron and coal his growing kingdom needs. He is not a vassal asking for favours. He is a peer, the head of a sovereign state, negotiating with another. The negotiations conclude, and the king, in a gesture of goodwill, invites you to witness a ceremony in the main courtyard, and it is here that the unexpected twist, the true nature of modern Ireland's power, is revealed. A gate is opened, and a column of men marches into the courtyard. They are not a feudal levy. They are a professional army. They are uniformed in tough, saffron-dyed leather tunics and conical steel helmets. They carry not a random assortment of spears and axes, but identical, steel-tipped pikes and heavy, single-edged swords. They move with the chilling, synchronized precision of men who do nothing but train for war. These, the king's translator explains with a smile, are the Fianna, the new model army of the High King. But they are not here for a parade. They are assembling for departure. A Hanseatic merchant, a grim-faced German from Lübeck, stands beside the king, inspecting the ranks. The king turns to him and speaks in Norse. The merchant nods and hands over a heavy chest that clinks with the sound of silver coin. The truth falls upon you with the weight of a granite slab. The Fianna are not just the king's army. They are Ireland's primary export. The High King maintains his power and pays for his libraries and his bureaucracy by hiring out his soldiers as elite mercenary companies. The endless, grinding wars in the fractured Holy Roman Empire, fueled by the ambitions of the French superpower to its west, have created a bottomless market for professional soldiers. In another world, the wild Irish kerns were a footnote in English military history. In this world, the disciplined Irish pike squares are the most sought after, most feared, and most expensive soldiers in Europe. You watch them march out of the fortress, their boots thudding on the timber causeway. They are on their way to a ship that will take them to Flanders, and from there they will march to the Rhine, to fight and die for some German prince in a quarrel they do not understand, for a river of silver that will flow back to this quiet, scholarly island in a lake. Ireland has not just survived. It has weaponized its manpower. It has turned the art of war into a national industry. As you sail for home, you look back at the green, deceptively peaceful coastline. England has a new kind of neighbour, not a fractious collection of tribal kingdoms to be ignored or exploited, but a centralized, wealthy, and highly militarized state. A state that has found a way to turn the chaos of the continent into its own strength. The Irish Sea is no longer a barrier. It is a border. And on the other side of it, a new and unpredictable power has risen from the mist. You are in a place of worship, but there is no silence here. The air is filled with a rhythmic, percussive clang of hammers on metal, the steady hiss of a blacksmith's bellows, and, underlying it all, a deep, grinding groan that seems to come from the very bones of the earth. This is the Abbey of St. Cuthbert in the Dale. Nestled in a high, water-rich valley in the Pennines, and it is the year of our Lord 1442. You are a lay brother, sent here from the gentle south to learn the art of illumination, but in 6 months you have not touched a brush or ground a pigment. You have learned to operate a trip hammer and to calculate the gear ratios of a water wheel. The Abbey is not a place of quiet contemplation. It is a factory. The Cistercian monks who founded it generations ago were masters of water power, and their descendants have turned that mastery into a new kind of faith. The river that flows through the valley has been tamed, channeled into a complex system of leats and canals that drive a dozen great wheels. They power everything. The grain mill, the fulling mill for the wool that is the North's great wealth, the forge hammers, the stone saws, and the great timber. Lathes. The monks here do not pray with their voices. They pray with their hands. Your master is Brother Cuthbert, an old man with a face like a winter apple and hands as thick and calloused as a stonemason's. He is the Abbey's craftmaster, and he is the keeper of the flame of a uniquely English way of thinking. This afternoon, he has brought you to the heart of the Abbey's intellectual life. It is not a library filled with the works of Aristotle and Aquinas. It is a vast, stone-floored workshop, the source of the great groaning sound. This is the Tungal Hoos, the Star House. In the centre of the workshop stands a machine of such bewildering complexity and beauty that it steals the breath from your lungs. It is a great sphere of brass and iron, 20 feet across, a skeleton of the heavens, interlocking rings and geared wheels, all polished to a soft gleam, surround a central gilded ball, representing the Sunday. Smaller spheres of silver and lapis and polished riverstone, representing the known planets, are mounted on slender arms, connected to a dizzying web of cogs and drive shafts that disappear into the stone floor. This is the great orrery of St. Cuthbert, and it moves. The groaning you hear is the sound of the immense water wheel in the undercroft below, its power transferred through a series of wooden gears, turning the entire celestial model in a slow, silent, and perfect imitation of God's own creation. The moon, a ball of polished silver, orbits the earth. The earth, in turn, makes its slow journey around the sun, an idea that is still debated with fierce scholastic anger in the universities of Paris and Bologna, but which is accepted here as a simple, mechanical fact. They are still arguing in their dusty halls. Cuthbert says, his voice a low rumble, gesturing at the machine with a wrench. They write 10,000 words, quoting books written by men who never once looked at the sky with a clear eye. They try to prove the world with logic. But we build the proof. This is the English mind, the empirical mind, in its purest form. It is the legacy of a nation that turned its back on the abstract, philosophical world of the Latin continent. Its intellectual heroes are not theologians, but men like Roger Bacon, the 13th century monk, whose forbidden works, championed by the independent English Church, became the foundational texts of this new learning. Bacon's creed was simple: sine experientia, nihil sufficienter siri potest. Without experience, nothing can be known sufficiently. The English have taken that creed and built a world upon it. They do not trust theories spun from words. They trust what they can build, what they can measure, what they can test. Herein lies the profound ethical tension of their science. You ask Cuthbert about the mathematical proofs, the complex equations that must underpin this celestial machine. He scoffs. Numbers are for the counting house, boy. They are a tool, like a hammer. They are not the truth. The truth is in the thing itself. He points to a gear. If that gear is true, if its teeth are cut to the right depth, the planet will move as it should. The proof is in the working. The continental mind wants to understand the world by turning it into a string of numbers. We understand it by building it. This is a science of brilliant craft, of inspired tinkering, of revolutionary engineering. But it is a science with a ceiling. By divorcing itself from the abstract power of higher mathematics, it limits itself. The monks can build a perfect clockwork model of the heavens, but they will never write the laws of universal gravitation. They can measure the effects of gravity with astonishing precision, but they will never capture its essence in a pure, elegant equation. They are masters of the how, but the continental scholastics, for all their word, spinning, are still the masters of the why. The English mind can create technological marvels, but it may never achieve a deep theoretical understanding of the universe. And then, as you watch the hypnotic, silent dance of the planets, Cuthbert reveals the unexpected twist. He shows you the true purpose of this magnificent creation. You had assumed it was a philosophical instrument, a tool for contemplating the perfection of God's design. But Cuthbert leads you to a small, quiet room adjoining the workshop. It is a map room. On a great table is an unrolled chart of the North Atlantic, showing the coastline of Vinland, and on the walls are dozens of newly drawn star charts of breathtaking accuracy. "The Jarls of Jorvik pay a heavy price for our work," Cuthbert says, his voice devoid of any spiritual pride. A sea captain, he does not care for the arguments of Aristotle. He cares where the North Star will be on a moonless night in 6 months' time. The machine, the Tungle Whos, it does not just show us how the heavens move. It allows us to predict where they will be. We can tell a captain with certainty the height of the sun at midday on any day of the year, in any part of the ocean. The great orrery is not a cathedral to God. It is a computer, a vast, water-powered mechanical computer for calculating navigational data. The monks are not seeking to understand the mind of God. They are in the business of making the Vinland trade safer and more profitable. The scientific revolution in this England is not being driven by a thirst for pure knowledge. It is being driven by the practical, commercial needs of its maritime empire. You look back at the beautiful, silent machine, and you see it now for what it island. It is the greatest expression of the English soul. It is a masterpiece of practical craft, a monument to the power of observation and experience, and a tool in the service of wealth and power. The English mind has looked at the stars, at the very architecture of the cosmos, and it has found not the face of God, but a new, more accurate way to draw a map. The year is 1776. You are standing on the deck of an English royal cog, a ship of a design that has not fundamentally changed in 400 years, and you are staring at a world that should not exist. For 3 months you have sailed west from Jorvik, a special envoy of the Witenagemot, your mission to put an end to the escalating defiance of the Crown's most distant and troublesome possession. But the place you have arrived at, the city of Vegrolt Roadhold, the capital of the Commonwealth of Witramanaland, does not feel like a possession. It feels like the capital of a different planet. Vegrolt is a city of wood, a city of giants. It spills from the mouth of a wide, deep river and climbs the forested hills on either side. There are no neat Georgian squares, no brick townhouses, no white-spired churches in the manner of Winchester. Instead, you see 1,000 great halls, their steep-pitched shingle roofs and intricately carved gables rising from a sea of green. They are the descendants of the wooden halls of your own English things, but they have grown wild, crossbred with the longhouse architecture of the first Norse settlers. They are vast, multi-family dwellings, their ridgepoles carved with the heads of dragons and eagles, a sight not seen in England for 500 years. The air smells of pine resin, wood smoke, and the clean, cold salt of the western Atlantic. You have come here with a portfolio of grievances. The Witramanalanders have, for a generation, refused to pay the royal timber tithe. They have been trading illegally with French and Breton fishing fleets, in defiance of the North Sea Compact's monopoly. Most outrageously, they have begun to mint their own silver currency, stamped not with the likeness of the English king, but with the image of a raven. Your task is to remind them that they are Englishmen, subjects of the crown, bound by the laws of the Witenagemot. As your party is led from the docks into the heart of the city, you feel the foundations of your mission crumbling with every step. The people are the most unsettling part. They are tall and fair, clearly of English and Norse stock, but their faces hold a different cast, a stillness in the eyes you do not recognize. Many of them show the clear, high cheekbones and dark, straight hair of the native Scrallings, a sign of centuries of intermingling that has created a new, distinct folk. They watch you pass not with the deference of colonists, but with the cool, appraising curiosity of a people in their own land. Their speech is a dialect of English, so archaic, so peppered with forgotten Norse words, that your Jorvik scribes can barely follow it. You are brought to the Althing, their great council. It is not a parliament building. It is a vast, open-air amphitheatre of concentric stone and turf benches, built on a sacred hill overlooking the city. At its centre is a great, flat-topped boulder, the Law Rock. Hundreds of men, the chosen representatives of the various holds and steads that make up their commonwealth, are gathered. They are not dressed in the silks and velvets of the Witenagemot. They wear buckskin, sealskin, and heavy, homespun wool, and many carry the long-bladed hunting knife that seems to be the universal tool of this land. Here lies the ethical tension of this world's creation. This is a free society, a fiercely democratic one, born of the practical traditions of the Shire Moot and the Norse Althing. But its very existence is predicated on a quiet, 700-year-long act of cultural erasure. You ask your guide, a stern, grey-bearded man named Brand, what became of the Scrallings. They are with us, he says, gesturing to the faces in the crowd. Their blood is our blood, their spirits are the spirits of this land, and we honour them. But you know what he means. They have been absorbed, assimilated, their language, their religion, their identity all but erased. Surviving only as a genetic trace, a handful of place names, and a few folk superstitions. This new civilization did not annihilate the old one with swift violence. It slowly, peacefully, and completely digested it. You are given leave to address the Althing. You speak of history, of kinship, of the unbroken line of descent from Harold Godwinson, of the laws that bind all English folk. You speak of loyalty and duty. When you are finished, a man rises from the assembly to answer you. He is the law speaker of the Althing, and his name is Leif Branson. We honour the Kazine king. Across the great water, Leif says, his voice clear and strong, echoing across the assembly. We honour the memory of the folk from whom we sprang, but the laws of England were made for a small island. This is not a small island. This is a continent. Our law comes from this rock, from the will of the freeholders of Hvitramanaland. He holds up one of the new silver coins. The raven is the bird of the All-Father, the seeker of wisdom who flies across the whole world. Our allegiance is to this land and to the God who watches over it. And with that, he leads you to the most shocking revelation of all, the great, unexpected twist that has grown in the isolation of this hemisphere. He takes you to their place of worship. It is the greatest hall in the city, a wooden cathedral whose carved oak pillars seem to hold up the sky. At the far end, you see a crucifix, the body of Christ, rendered with a stark, northern anguish. But the cross is not a Roman cross. It is an ankh, the ancient symbol of life, and it is entwined with what is unmistakably the image of a great world serpent. On the pillars, scenes from the Gospels are carved side by side with scenes from the Eddas. You see the loaves and the fishes next to Thor battling the giants. You see the raising of Lazarus next to Odin hanging himself on the world tree to gain the knowledge of the runes. Their priest, whom they call a Gothi, steps forward. He wears a simple white robe, but over it a cloak of raven feathers. He explains their faith. To them, Christ is not the gentle Lamb of God from the Mediterranean. He is the white God, the ultimate spiritual warrior, whose sacrifice was a heroic deed to conquer the darkness. He is a divine hero, like Balder. God the Father is the All-Father, the stern, wise, and inscrutable creator. like Odin. The Holy Spirit is the breath of the world, the magic that binds all things. It is not heresy, not as they see it. It is the completion of the faith, a gospel that has been adapted to a new, wilder world. A world that understands sacrifice, battle, and the deep magic of the untamed wilderness. You finally understand. Your mission has failed before it began. These are not Englishmen who have forgotten their duty. They are a new people. They are Huitramanalanders. Their politics, their blood, and even their god have become a uniquely American synthesis. They have not had a revolution. They have simply grown, over 7 centuries, into a different civilization. England has not nurtured a child that has now become rebellious. It has discovered a full-grown alien cousin, living in the house it thought was empty. As you stand in that strange, holy hall, you realize you are the first ambassador from the old world to a truly new one. You are standing on the walls of your city, Mainz, and you are watching the future arrive. It is the autumn of the year of our Lord 1788, and the future moves at a steady, relentless pace of 75 steps per minute. It comes in a river of dark blue wool and polished steel, a river that fills the entire valley of the Rhine. You have seen armies before. You have seen the liveried soldiers of your own Prince Elector, a glorious rabble of mercenaries in coats of mismatched white and yellow. You have seen the hired pike squares of the Irish Fianna, marching for whichever German princeling paid the most silver. They are men. This is something else. This is the Grand Army of the Empire of France. It is not an army. It is a migrating nation, state. You had heard the tales from the west, from the lands of Lotharingia, that had fallen a generation ago. Tales of armies 100,000 strong, of a logistical train that stretched for 50 miles, of a discipline so absolute it seemed inhuman. The tales were not exaggerated. They were understated. The columns advance in perfect geometric blocks. Their thousands of bayonets. A single, shifting field of light. Their artillery, great bronze cannons of a uniform, rational design, moves with them, not lagging behind. There is no cloud of ragged camp followers, no chaotic baggage train. There are only endless wagons of the imperial administration, each marked with the symbol of their master, the Iron Eagle. This is the culmination of 700 years of unchallenged centralized power, a France that never bled its strength away in 100 years' war, a France that crushed its own nobility into courtly servants centuries ago, a France that sees the rest of Europe not as a collection of rivals, but as a failed experiment in civilization that must be corrected. Their great king, Louis XVII, is not a warrior. He is an administrator, a man they call the Roi Philosophy, the philosopher king, and he has unleashed upon your world his ultimate philosophical argument. An army of 250,000 men, driven not by the revolutionary fervour of a desperate people, but by the cold, unshakable conviction of their own cultural and rational superiority. Your city, Mainz, is a jewel of the Holy Roman Empire, a place of ancient liberties, of powerful guilds, of a prince-archbishop whose family has ruled for 500 years. It is a city of crooked streets, of overlapping allegiances, of laws written in a dozen different dialects of German on parchments 1,000 years old. It is, to you, the world. To the French, it is a disease. The siege is a formality, an exercise in engineering. Their cannons do not bombard the city into rubble. Their fire is precise, methodical, targeting only the walls and the gates. The battle, when it comes, lasts 6 hours. The Irish mercenaries, hired at a ruinous cost, fight with their legendary suicidal bravery, but their pike formations which have dominated the battlefields of Europe for centuries, are simply erased by rolling volleys of French artillery fire. It is not a battle. It is a mathematical equation being solved. When the gates fall, the French army does not sack the city. This is, perhaps, the most terrifying thing of all. There is no looting, no random violence. The soldiers march in, take up their assigned positions with silent efficiency, and are confined to their barracks. They are followed by the other army, the army of administrators in their grey coats, their faces thin and severe, their eyes holding the passionless gaze of the true believer. They carry not muskets, but ledgers and measuring tapes and vast rolled-up maps. They are here to save you. You are a printer. Your family has owned a print shop in the shadow of the cathedral for 200 years. You have printed the Archbishop's edicts, the Guild regulations, the German Bible of Martin Luther, a text whose theological nuances have been debated in this city for centuries. You have printed poetry and almanacs and the messy, glorious, contradictory story of your people. The next morning, a French commissaire of rationality arrives at your shop. He is a young man, no older than 30, but his eyes are ancient. He does not speak your language. He does not have to. His translator is a German from a nearby university, a man who has embraced the new order with the zeal of a convert. The commissaire inspects your printing press. He looks at the books on your shelves. He picks up a copy of your German Bible. "This is a book of fables," he says, his French clipped and precise, the translator relaying the words. "It is filled with logical contradictions and historical inaccuracies. Its moral framework is based on unverifiable claims. It is an irrational object." He places it back on the shelf, as if it is contaminated. Your city, your entire so-called empire, is like this book. It is a collection of irrational traditions. Your laws are a chaos of local customs. Your economy is crippled by the superstitions of your guilds. Your language itself is a barrier to clear, universal thought. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to rationalize you. And there, in your dusty print shop, is the ethical tension of this new age. The French are not wrong about the chaos. They bring order. In the weeks that follow, they abolish the 1,000 confusing tariffs and tolls that have choked trade along the Rhine for centuries. They establish a single, unified legal code. They begin to build new roads, straight and true, that will cut through the ancient forests. They bring a peace, the Pax Gallica, to a land that has known nothing but the squabbling of petty princes. But the price is your soul. Your language is banned from the law courts. Your ancient university is reformed, its curriculum replaced with the cold logic of the Parisian academies. Your guild is dissolved. And your Bible, your poetry, your history, they are all scheduled to be burned, to be replaced by the clear, practical, and soulless textbooks of the new French Enlightenment. This is the great, unexpected twist of this world's intellectual history. The Enlightenment has come, but it is not an enlightenment of individual liberty, it is an enlightenment of the state. The French have taken the scientific method, the faith in reason and empirical evidence that has been growing across Europe, and they have applied it to the science of government itself. The result is not democracy. It is the perfect, efficient, totalitarian machine state. They are not tyrants in the old sense. They do not rule by divine right or brute force. They rule by the unarguable logic of the slide rule and the engineer's blueprint. You look for help, for resistance. But there is none. The Holy Roman Empire collapses like a house of rotten timbers. The North Sea Compact, your England and its allies, is powerless. Their great wooden fleets, the masters of the Atlantic, blockade the French ports. But it is a meaningless gesture. France is a continental power. It feeds itself. England has no army to land, no way to challenge the Iron Eagle on its own ground. From across the ocean, the Commonwealth of Witenagemot watches with a mixture of fear and grim satisfaction, its isolation now proven to be its greatest strength. The war is over before it has truly begun. The continent has been remade. You stand at the window of your print shop, soon to be repurposed, as a distribution centre for rational pamphlets. In the square below, a squad of French soldiers is drilling. Their movements are perfect, identical, a symphony of human machinery. They are the embodiment of the new age. The old world of faith, of custom, of messy, glorious, irrational humanity is over. The French have not just conquered Germany, they have conquered history itself. And you understand that the victory of Harold Godwinson on Senlac Hill did not save England from a tyrant. It merely isolated it, leaving the rest of the world to be perfected by a far more terrible and efficient one. So the arrow finds its mark, or it flies a foot to the left. A king lives, another dies. And from that single, random moment on a Sussex hilltop, two entirely different worlds are born. Is one a better world? Is one a tragedy? The other a triumph? The question itself is a trap. It assumes that history is a line, a march of progress toward a known destination. But perhaps it is not. Perhaps history is only a series of accidents, each one painting a new and incomparable picture with the same set of colours. In our world, freedom was a radical idea, forged in the fire of rebellion against Norman kings, written down on a charter at sword point. In their world, freedom was a conservative act, a quiet, stubborn refusal to abandon the old ways, debated in the great hall of the Witenagemot. Which is truer? Their England averted the trauma of conquest, but in doing so, it unleashed a far greater one upon the continent. The Norman boot on England's neck kept France weak, paranoid, and locked in a struggle for survival. Without it, France was free to become perfect. It was free to become a machine of pure reason, an empire of such terrible logical efficiency that it could dismantle 1,000 years of German culture without raising its voice. One timeline built a world on the chaotic, contradictory, and beautiful foundation of custom and faith. The other built a world on the clean, cold, and unbreakable foundation of logic and the state. They are not better or worse. They are simply alien to one another. The very meaning of what it is to be human, to be free, to believe in a God, has been irrevocably altered. A single arrow, loosed without aim into the twilight, did not change the path. It changed the destination entirely.